John Lennon once said, "You know, man, I should have been born in New York. I should have been born in the Village. That's where I belong." 1971, the Beatles broke up after a 10-year career that changed the world. However, this wasn't the first time that John Lennon has ever been to New York. That was when he, Paul, George, and Ringo played at Shea Stadium to thousands of screaming fans. After that, John Lennon fell in love with New York. But why? Well, today we're going to learn about John Lennon's New York. I'm Ariel, and you're watching Urbanist, and let's go around New York City.
Up comes the police, shoved us up the street, singing power to the people today. New York City, baby! Madison Square Garden. Hey! What's happening, man?
While the Beatles' breakup was being handled in courts, John wanted to start anew. Yoko convinced him to move over here to New York City, and this was the first place they stayed, in the St. Regis Hotel. However, New York City at the time was very different from the New York we know today. There was more grit and more grime. But John lit up when he knew that there was this type of city. To him, he said, quote, "There's the same quality of energy, vitality in both cities. New York is at my speed. I like New Yorkers because they have no time for the niceties of life. They don't believe in wasting time." I think he's pretty right about that. They stayed at the 17th floor in 2 suites. One of the suites were offices. And there they also recorded a demo for Happy Xmas, War is Over. It's one of the modern classic Christmas songs that we have today. Following that release of that single, were billboards all around New York City proclaiming "War is over" in big bold letters on a white background, but parentheses, "if you want it." That's when John started getting very political. However, through that kind of whiplash of controversy that he experienced those following years, he wanted to settle down in a neighborhood where he could be surrounded by the cutting-edge culture of New York. Let's go to Greenwich Village.
I'm only just beginning to understand what this record was about. 2, 3, 4. Think some karma's gonna get you, gonna knock you right in the head. You better get yourself together. Pretty soon you're gonna be dead. What in the world are you thinking of?
Greenwich Village. It's the center of cutting-edge New York City culture back in the early 1970s. The likes of Bob Dylan, Jimi Hendrix, and Lou Reed all lived in this area. And John Lennon and Yoko wanted to be right where the action was. So they decided to move here to 105 Bank Street. They actually live right next door to famous composer John Cage. However, their apartment was constantly broken into and robbed. So they decided to move away from this nice, cozy apartment to a place with a little bit better security. After long recording sessions at the nearby Hit Factory studio, John was known to come here to Smith's Bar and Restaurant for late night bites. Specifically, he loved the hamburger. However, due to the pandemic, I'm not sure if Smith's is going to reopen. Hopefully it does, so you can have the same hamburger that John Lennon had. However, if John Lennon were alive today, I think he would enjoy the place right next door, Shake Shack. While experiencing a brief separation from Yoko, John had a tryst with his secretary, May Pang. They stayed here at 434 East 52nd Street. He also took the famous photograph of him wearing the New York City t-shirts. It was taken by his longtime photographer and friend, Bob Gruen. You can find photos of it. It is an iconic shirt. However, in August 23rd, 1974, John and May saw something very strange from their rooftop. This is what John had to say.
Over here, up there, I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river. It wasn't a helicopter, it wasn't a balloon, and it was so near.
And it looked what, sort of round, white, luminescent, and silent?
Silent, and it looked dark, like black or grey in the middle, and had white lights, just looked like light bulbs, you know? Just going off, on, blink, 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 round the bottom, and on top was a red light.
According to May Pang, she and John called the police. However, the police reassured them that they were not the only ones that saw this UFO sighting. They got many, many more calls. What was it actually? Was it a real UFO? Who knows? However, in 1974, he ended up having a collaboration with a pop star that was very otherworldly in his own right. Let's go to Madison Square Garden. On November 28, 1974, John Lennon had his last on-stage performance here in Madison Square Garden with the newest British rock star that was ruling the airwaves, Elton John. They played their single together, Whatever Gets You Through the Night, which featured John as backing vocals and piano. However, according to the biographer of John Lennon, Philip Norman, he was so sick that night because he was so nervous to appear right next to the most extroverted and audacious performer of that time, Elton John, that he vomited backstage before coming onto the stage and greeting those thousands of screaming fans. Then they performed two singles which were very influential when Elton John was growing up. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and one of the very first Beatles hits, I Saw You Standing There. Apparently John was exhilarated after the performance because he felt that he was finally loved by the masses once again, after a stint of albums that were harshly criticized. The collaboration actually gave way to another collaboration at Electric Lady Studios with the famous David Bowie, and they sung exactly what they were going through: fame. However, after all that fame, drugs, sex, and alcohol, and also the screaming fans, John Lennon needed to finally escape from it and relax. That's why he went uptown to the Dakota. In the 72nd Street subway stop, you'll find a lot of these mosaics that were made recently in honor of John Lennon. And why exactly at this stop? Well, let's go upstairs. The Dakota is a fortress compared to their former home in Greenwich Village. They had 24/7 security and marvelous views of Central Park. Built in 1884, the Dakota got its name because it was so far uptown it might as well be in the Dakota territories. The facade is wonderful to look at because there's so many tiny little details. This was also the home featured in the film Rosemary's Baby. They had famous residents like Leonard Bernstein, who was the composer of West Side Story, and Judy Garland, who was the main actress of Wizard of Oz. This was the perfect place for John and Yoko to settle down and raise a family. Then on October 9th, 1975, the same day as John Lennon's birthday actually, Yoko gave birth to Sean Lennon. Then and there, John decided to leave music behind, to be the father his father never was, and to be the father he failed to be with Julian. He decided to be there every step of the way with Sean, with his beautiful boy, and leave his dear Yoko to handle the business. Thus, he became what he called a house husband. He loved to take strolls right here to Central Park. Let's take a look. Dakota was who was the owner of Tavern on the Green, which is Central Park's famous hidden restaurant. Here he celebrated his 38th and 39th birthday in combination with Sean's 3rd and 4th birthday. He often really loved walking through New York City, and one of the reasons he loved this city was because people usually won't swarm him like they used to do in England. Here, people might say hello, maybe ask for a simple autograph, and they'll be on their way. So John experienced a nice kind of quietness here in New York City as he roamed through the streets, usually with Sean on a baby stroller. They would continue off on their journeys through Central Park towards one of their favorite hotels. Let's check it out. In 1980, John came over here to one of his favorite hangout spots, the Plaza Hotel. Whenever he would go into the lobby, the string quartet would start playing a cover of Yesterday in honor of him. However, he never really noticed. Also, whenever people approach him at the bar or the lobby saying, "Hey, aren't you John Lennon?" he would actually reply saying, "No, but I wish I had his money." That day in 1980, he was meeting up with Ringo.
I saw him on the 15th of November, and I was staying in the Plaza. We went over to New York for a while, and I hadn't seen him for a while because, we see each other wherever we are, and he came over with Yoko for an hour, and we had such a great time because they stayed 5 hours, and it didn't matter if it was a year between we didn't see each other. It was always fine when we did, but it was a particularly great time that I had anyway.
Ending with their goodbyes saying that he was going to appear in Ringo's next album. This meeting was most likely the very last time John hung out with any other Beatle, because he hasn't seen Paul or George for quite a while.
What does life mean to you, John? Would it matter to you if it finished tomorrow, or do you want to live to an old age?
I'd like to live to ripe old age with Yoko only, and I'm not afraid of dying. I don't know how I'd feel at the moment, but I'm prepared for death because I don't believe in it. I think it's just getting out of one car and getting into another.
John gave his all to little Sean. He sung him lullabies, took him on strolls through Central Park, and even traveled the world. On one trip, when they were off to Bermuda, John had a sudden rush of inspiration. Thus, he came back quickly to New York City to record Double Fantasy and then subsequently Milk and Honey. However, on December 8th, 1980, at 5 p.m., John and Yoko were leaving their apartment. A man came around the corner and asked John to autograph his Double Fantasy album. A photographer that usually lingered outside of the Dakota to see what was happening with John Lennon and take a photo of him actually snapped a photo of John signing this autograph. And John asked this man, "Well, do you want anything else?" He was absolutely shocked by his politeness. Then at 10 p.m., John wanted to come back home early so he can sing Sean back to sleep. He refused to be driven into the courtyard and actually just asked to be driven right at the curbside of the Dakota. That same man who got his autograph signed on his Double Fantasy album came back out, took out a gun, and shot John a few times. I'd rather not say the man's name because he does not deserve any recognition. John fell down to the ground and said, "They shot me." Yoko screamed. The porter came and put his jacket over John to make sure he was still warm. The ambulance rushed him to the hospital, but he was proclaimed dead shortly thereafter. This was a tragedy in every sense of the word. He was taken away from us way too soon. And in front of the Dakota, right in Central Park, there's a very moving memorial to his life. Yoko Ono donated over $1 million to renovate this area of Central Park. And on October 9th, 1985, they unveiled this mosaic that reads Imagine. It was supposed to be the 45th birthday of John Lennon. And as I passed through this area of Central Park and looked down at this mosaic, I can't help but think to myself, what if John Lennon lived? What if he wasn't taken away from us so soon? How many more songs will we have stuck in our heads? And what if we had an elder Lennon still roaming the streets of Central Park and New York City? How would New York City itself be different? The most important thing that Lennon did to the world, in my opinion, is that he encouraged us to imagine a better place, to really take ourselves to places that could be more wonderful and more joyous. That's why all of his songs and many of the Beatles' own songs as well are just absolutely joy-inducing. So it's sad that he was taken from us so soon. However, I'm so grateful that John Lennon taught the world to make peace and not war. I'm Ariel, this is Urbanist, and this was John Lennon's New York. Thank you so much for watching.